lovelies, and welcome back to another edition of the Ages of Chaos. In this particular appendix video, as promised for quite a while, we're going to be taking a bit of a deep dive into the latest Chaos Daemons Codex for Warhammer 40,000. The way the Codex works now is that it is separated quite distinctly into books of the different powers, whereas, I mean, it's a funny thing. It's the Chaos Demons forces in 40k particularly seem to be determined in terms of how they're dynamic by market forces more than anything. It was when the Chaos Demons first kind of became a distinct force in 40k, way back in 4th ed, they were really pushing for this sort of polyglot demon army that had bits of everything in it. You benefited hugely from taking armies that were just like explosions in a paint factory, that had like Fiends of Slaanesh over here and Blood Crushers of Khorne over here, and led by Great Unclean Ones and Demon Princes. It was a mess. It was all over the place. Of course, that's not how players generally like to play Chaos powers. It's very apparent if you go and look at the various forums and army blogs and whatnot, that people like the more defined forces when it comes to Chaos. They like Chaos Space Marine legionary forces and renegade forces of particular renegade chapters, and when it comes to the demons, they generally tend to like polyglot, they generally tend to like god-specific forces. And funnily enough, this is probably the first book in a long time that really pushes that. You benefit hugely from taking god-specific armies from this book, as opposed to the polyglot forces that we're used to, and that works so much better, quite frankly. It works better dynamically. It gives you much greater focus, it gives you much more flavor and character, and it makes army selection just that much more simple. Now, one of the more interesting things they've done in this book in terms of the background is that they've really gone to town trying to rejig the descriptions of the powers themselves and of their forces. I mean, it has been the case up until very recently that, for the most part, the descriptions of the Chaos powers themselves were pretty old hat. You know, they were slightly embellished and rejigged from previous versions, but the basic details and even a lot of the language was the same. Here, they've gone to town looking at, like, Khorne, for example. What is Khorne at his base? What are the base emotions and phenomena that really inform Khorne, and how complex are they? And it's really well done. All of the language is new. It is not the rehashed stuff from 2nd ed and 3rd ed and so on and so forth. It's all new writing. What I particularly like is that they've paid attention to the alien species that worship Khorne in one aspect or way or another, because of course there are alien species that worship the Chaos powers. Given the relative youth of humanity as a species in the 40k universe, of course there are alien powers that worship the Chaos gods. There must be, right? And that's really wonderful. The nature of Khorne's faith is gone into very deeply here. You know, what actions and beliefs and feelings inform Khorne, and therefore what is it that he then requires of his mortal worshippers? It's quite a wonderful description, actually. There's a whole 2 pages here that describes Khorne himself and also the demons of Khorne. Like, how one of the things with regards to the manifestations of the demons of Khorne is that they've gone into not only what they look like and what their characteristics are, but what phenomena occur when they are manifesting. And this is true of all the Chaos powers. So when demons manifest in reality, they necessarily affect reality around them. You know, when Khorne's demons form, for example, there is this pervasive miasma of red mist, and though like mortal creatures around them become more aggressive and hostile and angry, the skies might weep blood, walls might blister with skulls and bone, and so on and so forth. There's all of this wonderful reality warping stuff, which I really like. There is also a depiction of Khorne himself, a sort of stylized depiction of Khorne himself. And what I really like about this depiction is A, it's new artwork, and B, it's much more 40k specific. So this version of Khorne is very different from those that have occurred before. He's less defined here. He's got way more arms than ever before, and he's holding all manner of weapons. He doesn't just have his classic, like, massive, like, Zweihander sword. He's got an axe. He's got this missile launcher on his back. One of his arms is holding, like, this gigantic, archaic, long-range weapon. It's a really wonderful depiction of Khorne. And it's great to see new depictions of the Chaos Gods occurring, because, of course, as almost every description of them states, there's no way of pinning down what they look like, because they appear differently depending on the cultures that depict them, the beliefs that are associated with them, and so on and so forth. And this is probably one of the most fitting and comprehensive depictions of Khorne I've ever seen, quite frankly. Now, the way the army lists work is that, again, they're separated into books. So you've got, like, the Book of Khorne here, which gives you all of the abilities, all the stratagems, and all of the data entries for the units of Khorne. One of the first things you have, I mean, first of all, there's a little, like, mini cover, the Book of Blood, and it has, above it, a tarot card, one of the Emperor's Tarot, which is the number 8, obviously. And again, you get this stylized depiction of Khorne. It's really, really cool. One of the first things you have are the benefits for exalted bloodthirsters. So if you have a bloodthirster in your army, you can upgrade it for a points cost with an exalted ability that makes it even more powerful. These exalted abilities: Indomitable Onslaught. Hate and bloodlust bind this demon's corporeal form together with such furious vehemence that its victims struggle to banish the rampaging monster with even the most powerful weapons. So basically, this model cannot lose more than 8 wounds in the same phase. Any wounds that would be lost after that point are not lost. It's really good. It's a way of making your bloodthirster more survivable in the face of long-range firepower. This is something that they've clearly considered, because since the advent of demons themselves in the 40k universe as a distinct force, they've suffered massively, because they're one of those weird armies that doesn't really have much in the way of long-range weaponry, and that's doubly true for the forces of Khorne, because they don't even have, like, the psychic powers that demons have traditionally used to shore up that particular shortcoming. So this gives your bloodthirsters a wee bit more defense against, for example, Drakari, Votan, Eldari, your Tau. Bloody hell. Yeah, it gives them a wee bit more survivability. It's very nice. Masters of the Blood Tide. The bloody tides of battle fill this demonic warrior with surging might. Every fresh charge and countercharge sending infernal vitality coursing through its limbs and lending renewed ferocity to its blows. Each time this model fights, if it made a charge move, was charged, or performed a heroic intervention this turn, then until that fight is resolved, add 1 to this model's strength and attacks characteristics. Might seem a small bonus, but actually for bloodthirsters it's pretty good. They already have a lot of attacks. There are already abilities by which you can give them a lot of attacks. So that is very, very, very nice indeed. It just makes them killier. And that's kind of what you want with Khorne forces. They are going to be manifesting quite close to the enemy from the earliest turns of the battle. I mean, that's another thing. The ability, I don't think it's a Warp Storm ability. What's it called? It's not a Warp Storm effect. It's one of the universal special rules. The Manifestation special rule that allows demonic units to basically deep strike in close to enemy units, but outside of the normal restrictions that occur for deep strike, because it's not that, it's something different. That is of enormous benefit to Khorne forces, because it means that they're not having to cross the battlefield first. It means that they're not having to face the firepower of the enemy before they get close, which is wonderful. It's a really, it just works synergistically really well with Khorne units. Rage Unchained. No matter the hurts done to it, this blood-spattered abomination continues to slaughter its foes without seeming even to register the desperate... that's not very well written. Even to register the desperate blows of? I think that may be a typo. This model is considered to have double the number of wounds remaining for the purposes of determining what its characteristics are. So even as it doesn't degrade, effectively, Bloodthirsters are big sort of Primarch scale monsters in this book, so they're not degrading as they take wounds is really, really good. Very, very nice indeed. So let's take a look at the Warp Storm table, actually. The Warp Storm table is the army-wide universal special rule for demons, and effectively every turn you roll 8 dice, and for every 4+ you gain a Warp Storm point, and you can spend those Warp Storm points on abilities from either the Undivided table or your God-specific table, and each of those abilities affects every unit on the battlefield. So even though they might seem like small benefits, actually they're quite significant. Like, take the Undivided effects, for example. So you've got Dark Invigoration. And this is basically, it allows you to heal multiple wound models, or to add destroyed models back to a unit. So again, it's all about giving them a little bit more survivability. It's really good. Primeval Terror. This is interesting. It's better than it appears to be. It's better than it appears to be because basically it's a -1 from the leadership characteristic of enemy units, basically, that are within range of the Demonic Terror ability. The Demonic Terror ability already affects their leadership. This affects it even further. There are other special rules that affect it even further, and then you use that in synergy with the Manifestation special rule, which actually, rather than utilizing like other factors, actually utilizes the enemy's leadership to determine how close they can manifest, because of course they affect people psychologically. That can actually be quite good when played well, when played cleverly. That's quite good. Music of the Warp. Use this effect at the start of your turn. Until the end of the turn, add 6 inches to the range of the Demonic Terror ability. So again, you're using it in synergy with other abilities, and it can be very, very useful indeed, because it doesn't just affect things like leadership, combat attrition, and morale. It actually affects your ability to get into engagement, which for Khorne armies, pretty damn good. Malicious Misdirection. Use this effect at the start of the reinforcement step of your opponent's movement phase. Until the end of that step, enemy strategic reserve units can only be set up as if it were the second battle round. So again, it's disruptive. It's disrupting the enemy's battle plan and their ability to position their forces, which for Khorne forces, again, is key, because if your enemy manages to maneuver into strong firing positions, you're screwed, basically. It's often the case that if the enemy army gets into, creates a strong firing pattern across the battlefield, Khorne armies are gonna really suffer. Magnified Glory. Use this effect at the start of any turn. Until the end of the turn, add 3 inches to the range of aura abilities of Legionnaires Demonica units from your army. Pretty good. It's pretty good. It means that the aura abilities take effect at a much wider range. So, and it also, bear in mind, that affects every character unit with an aura ability on the battlefield. So that, again, in concert with certain synergies, can be very, very good indeed. Otherworldly Tread. Use this effect at the start of your movement phase or at the start of your charge phase. Until the end of the phase, Legionnaires Demonica units from your army can ignore any or all modifiers to their move characteristic, advance rolls, and charge rolls. Very good for Khorne units. Very good, because they are going to be wanting to move quickly and not be impeded by landscape and things like that, and also to charge across landscape as well. So again, very good. Descending Shadow. Use this effect at the start of your opponent's shooting phase. Until the end of the phase, each time a ranged attack is made against a Legionnaires Demonica unit from your army, if the attacker is more than 12 inches away, subtract 1 from the attack's hit roll. Again, it's looking at the innate weaknesses of demon armies and giving them a boost. It's giving them something that makes them a wee bit more survivable. That's very good, actually, especially for Khorne armies. That's very good. And Insidious Whispers. Again, this one, for Khorne armies, this is going to be useful. Use this effect at the start of your opponent's psychic phase. Until the end of the phase, Legionnaires Demonica units from your army have the following ability. Insidious Whispers. This is an aura, bearing in mind. So you can use the previous effect to expand the range of this aura. While an enemy Psyche unit is within 12 inches of this unit, each time a psychic test is taken for the Psyche unit, it suffers perils of the warp on any dice roll that includes a double, instead of only a double 1 or double 6. That's nasty. Imagine if you're facing a Thousand Suns army, or a Zeech demon army, or an Eldari army, you know, armies that rely on their psychic powers. That's pretty unpleasant and gives Khorne armies that don't have psychic defense otherwise, again, a bit of a boost. Now, for the Khorne specific, there are 3. Fury of Khorne. This just adds 1 to the attacks characteristic of Legionnaires Demonica Khorne units. That might not seem a very big benefit until you take into account that Khorne units already have a ton of attacks, and this applies across the army to every unit in the army, right, when you play it. So that is actually quite nasty. Burning Terror. This is a weird one. Use this effect at the start of your shooting phase. Roll 1d6 for each enemy unit within 24 inches of any Legionnaires Demonica Khorne units from your army, and that is not wholly within an area terrain feature. On a 6, that unit suffers die 3 mortal wounds. It's situational, but again, it means that your Khorne units, which otherwise don't really have shooting abilities, barring 1 or 2 entries, it means they can whittle down the enemy from afar. It can be pretty good. And it's only 2 Warp Storm points, so if you've got some left over during your shooting phase, you're not going to be doing much else, so why not, you know? And the last one is Overwhelming Rage. Use this effect at the start of your opponent's movement phase. Until the end of the phase, each time an enemy unit, excluding aircraft units, within engagement range of any Legionnaires Demonica Khorne units from your army is selected to fall back, roll 1d6. On a 4+, that unit cannot fall back. So it's preventing the enemy from using nasty tricks, from being cowardly effectively. It means that your units are going to be able to assault them, and they're not going to be able to get out of it or sort of fall back and shoot if they've got that ability. It's a nice idea. Now, the stratagems for Khorne. Frenetic Bloodlust. Ravening packs of blood letters spill across the battlefield, seeking out the foe eager to spill their blood. Use this stratagem at the start of the fight phase. Select 1 Blood Letters core unit from your army. If that unit is not within engagement range of any enemy units, make a normal move of up to 6 inches with that unit. It must end this move closer to the closest visible enemy unit. If that unit is within engagement range of any enemy units, make a pile-in move with that unit. So basically, it means that the enemy are not going to be able to get away from your blood letters, and blood letters are good in this book. They've had a massive upgrade. It means that they're just going to keep hounding the enemy, which is very Khorne actually. They are the huntsmen of Khorne, so that kind of works. Glorious Decapitation. No sight does more to drive the legions of the Blood God into a killing frenzy than the head of an enemy champion lopped off in a fountain of gore, and another worthy skull added to the charnel mountain upon which Khorne's brass throne is set. Lovely language in this book. Use this stratagem when an enemy character model is destroyed by a melee attack by a Legionnaires Demonica Khorne character model from your army, which is going to happen a lot, believe me. You're not going to want to face these guys in close combat. Until the end of the battle, the Khorne character model has the following ability. Slayer of Champions Aura. While a friendly Legionnaires Demonica Khorne unit is within 6 inches of this model, each time a model in that unit makes an attack, an unmodified wound roll of 6 inflicts 1 mortal wound on the target, in addition to any normal damage. That's really good. That's really good. It effectively gives your characters a new aura ability. So that's really excellent actually. And that aura enhances the close combat capacities of your normal units. And that's excellent actually. Relics of the Brass Citadel just means that you can give a character an extra relic. It's standard. Contempt for Sorcery. Yay! This is a familiar one. The loathing for witchery that radiates from the demons of Khorne can unmake even the mightiest of conjurations. Use this stratagem in your opponent's psychic phase. After a psychic test is passed for an enemy psyche unit, and after any deny the witch attempt is made, if that enemy psyche unit is within 24 inches of any Legiones Daemonica Khorne units from your army, roll 1d6, adding 1 to the result if that enemy psyche is within 12 inches of any Fleshhound units from your army. On a 4+, that psychic power is denied. It's pretty good. It's only 1 command point, and it's pretty good. Very nasty for the likes of Thousand Suns, that one. Brass Stampede. This is nice. The demonic cavalry and chariots of the demons of Khorne slam into the enemy lines like a brass-shod avalanche of death. Use this stratagem after a Legiones Daemonica Khorne cavalry or Legiones Daemonica Khorne vehicle unit from your army finishes a charge move. Select one enemy unit within engagement range of that unit and roll 1d6 for each model in the charging unit, adding 3 to the result if the charging unit is a vehicle. On a 6 to 8, that enemy unit suffers die 3 mortal wounds. On a 9, that enemy unit suffers die 3 plus 3 mortal wounds. So that's good. That's very nice. It's just extra mortal wounds for charging from particular units, and it really enhances the likes of your Thrones of Brass, your Brass Cannons of Khorne, you know, Skull Cannons of Khorne or whatever, and also your Blood Crushers. It's very nice. This is an old-fashioned one. This is like Banner of Blood. That's a throwback way back to Realms of Chaos, Slaves to Darkness. It's very nice. The Dark Icons carried above Khorne's demonic hosts spur those who march below them forward with a greater fury. Use this stratagem when a Legiones Daemonica Khorne icon unit from your army is selected to charge. Until the end of the phase, each time you make a charge roll for that unit, roll 1 additional dice 6 and discard the lowest result. So again, making sure that they get into charge range. That's what that is all about. In terms of Warlord traits, we've got Aspect of Death, which is an aura. Such is the palpable aura of dread this demon emanates that its enemies may die of sheer terror. While an enemy unit is within 6 inches of this warlord, subtract 1 from the leadership characteristic of models in that unit. Each time a combat attrition test is taken for that unit, subtract 1 from the combat attrition test. It may seem quite small potatoes, that one, until you consider the synergies that it has with other rules. Then it's pretty good, as we mentioned earlier. Number 2 is Brazen Hide. This demon's warp flesh is infused with rune-wrought brass that shatters blades and turns aside even the most powerful enemy blows. Each time this warlord would lose a wound, roll 1d6. On a 5+, that wound is not lost. So it's a shrug. It's a shrug for your bloodthirsters. That's nice. Bloody hell, that's actually really nice. That makes them even tougher than they actually are. Devastating Blow. So monstrous is the strength behind this warlord's blows, and so unstoppable their hatred, that they can lay victims low with but a single strike. Each time this warlord makes a melee attack, rules that ignore wounds cannot be used, so that takes away the shrug, basically. That's really good. That's very good against certain armies, actually. Glory of Battle. The more foes that surround the demon, the faster and more eagerly it fights. Add 1 to this warlord's attacks characteristic. That's nice in and of itself. While this warlord is within 3 inches of 6 or more enemy models, add another 1 to this warlord's attack characteristic. So that's nice. While this warlord is within 3 inches of 11 or more enemy models, add another 1 to this warlord's attack characteristic. So you just keep escalating depending on how many foes it's facing. Very nice. Immense Power. The molten fury of the Lord of Battle rages within this demon, and its body is swollen with unholy might. Each time this warlord makes a melee attack, add 1 to that attack's wound roll. Short, simple, and sweet. You're not really going to need that unless you're taking like a bloodletter-based warlord, because bloodthirsters are strong enough as they are, really. It's okay. It's fine. It's very simple down the road. Not the one I would take, though. Number 6, Rage Incarnate. The fury with which this demon hurls itself at the enemy serves as a beacon of wrath to its like-minded minions. Add 1 to advance and charge rolls made for this warlord. Each time a friendly Legiones Daemonica Khorne core unit declares a charge against an enemy unit within engagement range of this warlord, add 1 to the charge roll made for that unit. Situational, but potentially very, very useful indeed. Most of the relics are various forms of armor and weaponry, as you would expect. So you've got the armor of scorn. Though this armor was forged in the brass citadel, it was the blood god's contempt that gave it life. Eons after its creation, it is the same burning scorn that shields its bearer in battle. Each time an attack with a damage characteristic of 1 is allocated to the bearer, add 1 to any saving throw made against the attack. Very nice. Keeps the demons safe from massed firepower. Each time the bearer would lose a wound as a result of a mortal wound in the psychic phase, roll 1d6 on a 4+, that wound is not lost. Again, very nasty. Gives them some psychic defense. The Crimson Crown. It is said that this crown was created from a single drop of Khorne's blood. A measure of the blood god's endless wrath is bound within the crown, and its effect upon his demonic servants is palpable. Fueled by the artifact's fell presence, Khorne's demons are driven to ever greater heights of savagery and slaughter. At the end of each battle round, if the bearer destroyed any enemy models during the battle round, you can retain up to 2 unspent warp storm points. That's good. That's really good. It means that you can top up your warp storm points as you go. It's very nice. Rune of Brass. Etched into the demon's armor or embedded into its flesh, the Rune of Brass retains the infernal heat of its creation. The glare of its still molten form is agony to witches, for it conjures the all-consuming blaze of the pyre and twists their powers against them. The bearer has the following ability, Rune of Brass Aura. While an enemy Psyker unit is within 12 inches of the bearer, each time a psychic test is taken for that unit, it suffers perils of the warp on any dice roll that includes a double. It's very good. Each time that unit suffers perils of the warp, it suffers die 6 mortal wounds instead of die 3. It's very nice. Very nasty against Thousand Sons, I can tell you. Blood Drinker Talisman. Seized from the blasted surface of a crone world, which is a dead elder world in the Eye of Terror, this sentient gemstone resides within the warp-wrought body of its demonic master. There it pulses with malign murder lust, drinking in the blood that sprays its host's flesh during battle, and channeling the stolen life force to reknit the corporeal form of the demon within which it resides. Each time the bearer fights, after resolving its attacks, roll 1d6 for each enemy model that was destroyed by those attacks. On a 5+, the bearer regains 1 lost wound. That's very nice. It's just a regeneration effect. It's very nice. Argath, the King of Blades. When a demon is bound within a weapon by its infernal master, it rarely submits willingly to this terrible incarceration. The same cannot be said for Argath. A lifetime of slaughter and zealous dedication saw this butcher granted demonhood. Such was his devotion to Khorne that instead of accepting immortality as a demon prince, he instead chose to take the form of a deadly blade, so that he could spill the lifeblood of Khorne's greatest enemies. Their hand guided by Argath's spirit, this weapon's wielder becomes nigh on unstoppable. Countless are the rival champions and mortal heroes that have fallen to its power. Select 1 melee weapon the bearer is equipped with. Add 1 to the damage characteristic of that weapon. Very nice, given that bloodthirsters already have very high damage. Each time the bearer makes a melee attack with that weapon, you can ignore any or all modifiers to the attack's hit roll, and any or all modifiers to that attack's wound roll. That's very good. The weapon is now considered to be a relic. Yeah, that's lovely. It just makes your bloodthirster even more killy. That's really nasty, actually. Skull Reaver. This monstrous axe forms the prison for a bloodthirster defeated in a duel against a rival champion of Khorne. The rage of the trammeled demon causes the blade's infernal runes to blaze with the heat of a captive star, and keeps its edge so supernaturally sharp that a single blow from Skull Reaver can lop the head from the mightiest foe, or decapitate an entire rank of lesser victims. Model equipped with Axe of Khorne only, so a bloodthirster. This relic replaces an Axe of Khorne and has the following profile. So it basically gives the bloodthirster a really strong sweep and mighty strike ability. And it also has this ability. Each time an attack is made against a vehicle or monster unit with this weapon's mighty strike profile, that attack has a strength characteristic of ×2 and a damage characteristic of die 3+3. Oh, that's nasty. So again, it's just making bloodthirsters, which are already killy bastards, all that much killier. In terms of the data sheets for each of the units, everything has had a glow up. Everything is much nastier. You've got Scarbrand here, and he is just, he's insane. He's a really nasty piece of work. I mean, I'm wondering, looking at him, how they're going to differentiate like Angron from him, because Angron could use these rules and it would work. He's a really nasty, nasty piece of work. You don't want him reaching your lines because he's just going to obliterate you effectively. He's got so many attacks and so many high damage, high strength attacks with incredible armor piercing. Yeah, he's a bastard. He's a really nasty piece of work. He also has what I would consider to be the best aura ability in the game, which is while a unit, not an enemy unit, not a friendly unit, but any unit on the battlefield, friendly or otherwise, is within 6 inches of this model, add 1 to the attacks characteristic of models in that unit. Each time a morale test is taken for that unit, it is automatically passed. Each time that unit is selected to fall back, the controlling player rolls 3d6. If that total is greater than that unit's leadership characteristic, that unit cannot fall back. So he locks you into combat. You can't fall back, you can't retreat, and you're not going to want to. It just becomes carnage around him. He exudes raw anger, and it's brilliant. It's really wonderful. The Bloodthirster is interesting because this should have been done ages ago. Instead of having the 3 distinct types of Bloodthirster you had before, they've all just been rolled into one, which makes a lot of sense, and you just have different weapon options for them, which is fantastic. They are everything you'd expect them to be. They are massive, they are tough as all hell. They've got loads of attacks. They have some of the nastiest close combat weapons in the game. They are bastards. They are really unpleasant. I would argue for the first time. I mean, Bloodthirsters, they used to be legendary once upon a time. Bloodthirsters used to be like the thing that you put on the battlefield and people were afraid of it. They haven't been that for a very long time, especially not in 40k. But now, yeah, they're back, and they're back with a vengeance. Skulltaker with his lovely new model. Skulltaker's lovely, actually. Skulltaker he's a very solid HQ choice with a really horrible weapon, the Slayer Sword, which has very high AP, very high damage, and ignores invulnerable saves. So he's a bit of a demon killer, this guy. He also has just some wonderful like aura abilities. He can like decapitate enemies, which is very nice. He can take their skulls to enhance himself. Very, very nice indeed. You've got the Bloodmaster, which is your bloodletter command unit, which again is just a kill. It's just a kill machine. It's a herald. So it's your lieutenant, effectively, and it's very, very nice. You've got your Skullmaster, which is probably the one most people are going to go for, to be honest, who is a bloodletter riding a juggernaut. So he's a bloodletter times like 8, basically. Tougher, faster, stronger, more attacks, more sort of strength and whatnot. He's very, very nasty indeed. Renmaster on Bloodthrone. So this is the like one of the big war engines of Khorne, and it's quite nice. It's quite nice. It basically gives you a new aura ability which affects your bloodletters, which is useful, and also it's a war machine, so it's a bit tougher, it's a bit stronger. It's got a bit more in the way of attacks. It's not bad. It's not bad at all. Karanak is here, the three-headed fleshhound of Khorne, the Cerberus of Khorne, if you like. He's very nice. He gives abilities to your fleshhounds, which is cool. And basically, he's an assassin character. You want him seeking out those characters in the enemy army that are going to be causing you difficulty, because he will kill them quite quickly. Bloodletters have had a massive glow up. They've got higher strength than they had. They've got higher attacks than they had. They've got a better save than they had. They've got a better weapon than they had. They've got their Hellblades are now armor piercing 3, damage 2. So that's very nice. And they all have 2 attacks apiece. So they're pretty nasty. In conjunction with some of the Warp Storm abilities, the Manifestation ability, they're a very solid pack core unit. They're quite nice. Blood Crushers are fantastic. They're Bloodletters riding Juggernauts of Khorne. So yeah, they're a really nasty, strong elite unit. You're going to want a lot of these actually in your army, because on the charge they're pretty devastating. Lots of attacks. They do attacks with the horn on the Juggernaut, which are malefic attacks, so then you can't negate them using any abilities you would normally. Yep, they're pretty good. They're pretty good. They've also got a stratagem that allows them to do extra damage when they charge, so not bad. Fleshhounds are one of your fast attack options. In fact, they're your only fast attack option. And yeah, you're going to want quite a lot of them. They are very good psychic defense, if nothing else. And they also now have a ranged attack, which is their Burning Roar. It's not amazing, but it's effectively a flamer. It's like a little flamer weapon, and it's good. It's really, really good. It gives you a little bit of long-range support. You've got the Skull Cannon, which is a fine, heavy support unit. It's not amazing, it's not going to set the world on fire, but given that you don't have much in the Khorne army anyway, and this thing's long-range attacks ignore cover as well, so it's to flush out the enemy. It's not incredible by the standards of long-range units in other armies, but given it's kind of ubiquitous, really. Given the lack of anything like this otherwise in the Khorne army, it's pretty good. It's pretty damn good. I'd take 3 of them myself. I mean, you can also take a Soul Grinder if you like, which is also pretty good. You've got the Skull Altar, which is a rare thing in this book. It's actually a bit of terrain, a bespoke bit of terrain for the forces of Khorne, and it gives you psychic defense and also gives you the ability to sort of extend your aura abilities if you've got a character ensconced on it, which can be very useful if you play it cleverly. Now, there are also undivided units that you can take to sort of shore up basically the holes in the Khorne army. You can take Demon Princes, which are, again, have had a massive glow up. They work really, really well in the Chaos Demons force. Very nice lieutenants, actually, and alternatives for your Bloodthirsters. And, of course, you've got the Soul Grinder, which, again, it's a war engine. It's a war engine for your Khorne forces, and it gives them some much-needed firepower. You're probably going to be taking a couple of them in a Khorne army. So yeah, that's how Khorne armies are represented in Codex Chaos Demons, and they're pretty good. They are pretty good. They are cost-effective. They're pretty cheap, or by and large. They've got a lot of nasty monsters with them. I mean, the other way you can use the Khorne units from this army is in a World Eater's army. And it's going to be... I'm going to talk about how they synergize when we've got the World Eaters Codex, of course. But at the moment, since we are using the World Eaters Get You By list that was presented in their Heretic Astartes article in White Dwarf, they synergize quite well. You can take a small detachment of Khorne demons, and so long as it's not more than 25% of your overall points cost, you can still use all of the sort of universal special rules for your World Eaters, which is fantastic. It means that you can take things like Bloodthirsters, and you can take things like packs of Bloodletters or Fleshhounds and whatnot, and use them alongside your World Eaters, which, quite frankly, besides any functional abilities that might give, it's fucking cool, isn't it? It's just really cool. So, yeah, that was the Book of Khorne. There was a lot to get through there. Next time, my loves, we'll do one of my absolute favourites. We'll do the Book of Tzeentch, because... well, why wouldn't you? Tzeentch demons do well in this book. They really do. And I'm going to be getting a couple for my Thousand Sons, I can tell you. So until next time, my loves, bye-bye!